So welcome to the final portion of this mini build-a-prop tutorial. I'm just getting things set up and configured in Painter. I've pulled the mesh in, obviously pulled in the normal map that was baked in Modo. Now I'm going to use Substance Painter to bake the other maps. It'll use the imported normal map and the low poly geometry to generate the other maps. It's just something I like to do. Get some Metallica going because I like to just have music blasting while I paint stuff. It's just, it's more relaxing. Because this is really kind of the most creative part of it. You get to lay in materials and paint some masks and just generally have a pretty good time. It's very zen. So to kind of explain the process a bit, I will throw on some smart materials just to see if I like what I'm seeing, and just to generate a base layer of color, and try to find this is the basic metal that I want, this is the basic wood that I want, the plastic, that kind of stuff, and then I will go in later and paint in specific paint in additional masks and additional filter effects and that kind of thing. It's like I say, this is a creative thing that I enjoy doing. So there's probably faster ways of going about this, but I try to savor the parts of the job that I like, and this is one of those parts. Yeah, see, I'm liking the way that that material was looking, but I didn't like the coloration, so we desaturated it, and I'm liking kind of the used kind of silvery chrome kind of look. So we're going to use that for the base and kind of build on top of it over time. So this is typically how I'll lay in layers. For the most part, I will just use the flood fill options and then go ahead and remove the parts that I don't want. And in this case, I could have baked a surface ID map in Modo, or used different material colors and baked out a color map or whatever, and I did the masking that way. But I tend to enjoy painting, so I just kind of just am pretty okay with just painting in the masks. Yeah, it's not the most efficient thing, and if I was on a super tight deadline, I would definitely use a color mask. But since I'm not, or I wasn't in this case, I like to take the time to paint and really enjoy the process to the fullest. So what's happening here is I'm going to make a void folder, which is basically a dark area that doesn't reflect light, is not metallic, that kind of stuff, and that'll be used just to stick in holes and things to make it obvious, or to give the impression that there's a hole there, but you can't quite see what's inside. It's not technically correct, but it's good enough. It looks, it's convincing enough in the game itself. And actually, you may have noticed something weird back there when I was trying to paint, but it wasn't working. That's, I wouldn't call it a bug necessarily with Substance Painter, but it's an unpleasantness where if you mirror something, you can only paint on the part that sits in the 0 to 1 space. The part that we moved over, remember that back in the mirroring video? The parts that don't sit inside of 0 to 1 can't be painted on. So Substance Painter just, ignores you. And so you think, okay, is my mask not set up correctly? Is the pen set up wrong? Is my flow zero? Whatever. And eventually you realize, oh, I'm painting on the other mirrored side. Damn it. So yeah, that's a source of frustration for me that I actually wish they would fix, but they haven't yet. So I rant about it on my YouTube channel. I think with this section here, I try a few different things going forward. A couple different ways of breaking this up because I didn't like it being entirely silver, and so I eventually mixed some brass and things in there. You know, it's all about that iteration. So this is where I start to introduce the brass type material. And I think I add a third type of metal later on as well. It's nice to have a couple different metals that look good together, and it gives you something to break up the mesh with. So it's not all the same chrome or the same metal. It just gives it gives the mesh a little more visual appeal. So here's that third piece of metal, or that third type of metal, I should say. Uh, it looks a lot like the first one, except that it's darker, which is nice for accent lines and that kind of thing. And I believe coming up here, we're going to add the red plastic that goes on the shell casing. And we use that in a few other spots on the mesh as well, like on the grip and somewhere else that's not coming to my head right now. And I'm realizing now this one is actually, or this video section is longer than the other ones. It's the longest one of this little series. But, and that's even being sped up 200%. It's, But I think this is part of the process that people want to see that I didn't really show in the other videos I've done. I think it's interesting to see the process, pretty much start to finish. We baked the maps and brought it in, and we're painting this thing up from scratch, and you can definitely see that it is a process, and there's really no magic bullet. You just have to go in, make decisions, make some masks, and just you let your mind wander. This part was a lot of fun, painting in this curly stuff, but it was important to me to have a separation between the metal in the background and the raised details. That actually ends up looking really good on the resulting game res mesh. It adds to the visual clarity. It adds some contrast and that kind of stuff. So it's totally worth spending this time to go through and make sure that this looks right. And as I've said several times, it's fun to paint this stuff. It's not particularly it's not a technical challenge, and the design work is done for the most part, in terms of the mesh. So it's really just a matter of you laying down some pixels. So yeah, let's continue to do that. So the one tip that I will pass along here is just what you saw me doing there on that past section was you don't be afraid to jump into the 2D view when you're painting. When you're painting stuff out, it's often there's often stuff that's in the way when you're painting in 3D, and using the 2D view can really speed things along because you can get that stuff out of your face. The challenge comes when you have a small piece you want to paint on and you don't know where it is on the UV map. So either you just have to put in some random brush strokes to find it, or you maybe have Moto running at the same time, so you can Alt Tab over and just select those polygons and see where they are. You just give yourself a hand basically. And now I'm going through and just kind of tagging stuff that could use highlighting, you know tagging stuff with the alternate metal materials just to make it stand out and to give the mesh some nice visual contrast. And I'm really liking how that's playing out, to be honest. I started getting kind of excited at this point because I could see that the brass was really working well with the silver, and it's pretty, and that's really the point with a lot of this stuff. Now, I don't think I end up keeping that black metal. I think I changed that. I swapped that out to something else, but it's all about that iteration, like I keep saying. Yeah, in terms of design, I actually wish I had done more with that sight on the far end of the gun. It feels cool, but it feels like it could have been cooler. But it's certainly good enough for what it is. Yeah, the gun handle here, this goes through a few revisions as well, just trying to figure out what's going to work well because I wanted it to have variation in the texturing, but also not look like like a busy mess. And it was, yeah, you'll see as we go along here. Okay, this is the last section of video. Yeah, more tweaking of that void texture. Yeah, there's that replacement metal for that dark area that looks much better. It's much more subtle, but it still gives you that value differentiation, which still works. It still makes it still separates the areas of the mesh apart from each other, but it doesn't look so overt, I guess. So yeah, I was pretty happy with that. What you're seeing here is I'm painting with just the mask visible. If you don't know how to do this, just in your Substance Painter layer stack over there, just do an Alt click on the mask, and that will hide all the texturing except for that mask. And it can be very useful for stuff like this, where you want to make sure you're getting all the polygons selected, and then when you click anywhere else, it pops back into normal view. Very useful stuff. As tedious as this looks, I did feel that this was a nice bit of polish for that top piece of metal that wraps around there. That that slightly darker trim just puts a nice frame on everything, and they just really worked for me visually. So I'm still looking for areas where I can introduce contrast and different types of materials, and just ways to break up the surface of the mesh. so it doesn't look so obviously, like a baked normal map detail. When it's got its own texture, when it looks distinct, your mind can more easily believe that it's distinct and that's not just a flat polygon. And that's those sorts of those sorts of hints to the brain are a big part of what game art is. It's convincing the mind that there's detail there that really isn't there. So as this section is wrapping up, I wanted to say thank you for watching. This has definitely been one of the longer videos, one of the longer video series on the channel. This whole shotgun mini-series. But it's also one of the better ones, I think. I really liked how this piece turned out. So if you like the video, please like it. Please hit the like button. That helps it come up in search stats and that kind of stuff. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. That really helps me to know, whether I'm doing things right or I'm doing things wrong, and I am doing things that interest people or I'm not. That kind of stuff. So anyway, help me out and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And maybe check out the Patreon account when you're done here. See if you like my campaign, and maybe you want to support me there as well. So yeah, thanks, and I'll see you next time.